At the heart of Don't Nod's Vampyr is a brilliant dilemma. To feed or not to feed? Okay, it's a little more complicated than that. The tale of Jonathan Reed, a doctor turned vampire in post-war London, fits into a long tradition of vampire myths. Broadly speaking, vampires serve as a metaphor for fears of a time. One of its key origins was terrified peasants seeing bodies decompose after death and mistaking these changes for an unholy transformation. Oh peasants, what won't you believe? A few puritanical themes also pervade. If you surrender to the allure of the vampire's hedonistic ways, you become tainted and turn away from all that is pure and good. Either that or you die, which also sucks, pun intended. And so the driving force behind a lot of vampire stories has been the disease of bloodlust, how it ties into morality and ethical attitudes of the time. Don't Nod's Vampyr weighs in on these themes too, from the perspective of the creature itself. It isn't the first game to give us fangs and a conscience. We've wrestled with this stuff in everything from Vampire the Masquerade to the Elder Scrolls, but it explores the role in a distinct way. In this video, I want to look at how the game handles choice, specifically from the unique perspective of an unabashed predator. I'll be talking about the systems and some plot points from the first hour of the game for the spoiler averse. Let me repeat, there are spoilers for the first hour of the game. From the outset, it's refreshing to meet a protagonist who's unapologetically a predator. Games tend to fit into two categories when it comes to dealing with violence. You're either a grubby anti-hero like Manhunt's James L. Cash doing people in with shopping bags, or the lovable rogue forgiven his crimes of mass murder. Nathan Drake is one such charming psycho, pardoned for genocide because he's sarcastic and says funny things when his trousers get wet. Jonathan Reed, by contrast, is something of an outlier, and he's pure predator. He stalks, infiltrates the lives of, and influences the citizenry, all with the mind to leading his prey into a secluded corner where he can feed on, or embrace them, as the game puts it. These aren't just faceless NPCs, health packs dressed up in interwar British smocks, but fleshed out victims he has selected carefully. He's presented this way, and you participate in and instruct his behaviour. No matter how well dressed or polite Jonathan is, he's the villain of the piece. You play as the monster, which means you have a unique perspective on the events of the story and a much more dynamic relationship with the world because of it, based on your playstyle. That said, where this character obviously breaks from the unbridled brutality of something like Manhunt, the inclusion of player choice adds a kind of pathology to proceedings. Not so much a goal, but a grey area that feeds into themes of morality. Weirdly, the game doesn't actually begin with choice, but an interactive cutscene that compels you to feed without player participation. It's something the game almost apologizes for in the tutorial that follows, as Reed encounters various characters who reinforce the idea that bloodsuckers have some say in their behavior. On the surface, Vampyr walks and talks like an RPG. There's experience, leveling up and skill trees, so you can build Jonathan, the character, from the ground up, giving him an array of supernatural abilities. I don't think that this central loop is any more complicated than most RPGs, but where it does differ is using the source of experience to create moral conundrums. You see, the pool of experience that you draw from is far more unusual. We learn that a range of different characters populate this world, and that their blood contains the experience points we hunger for. All of these people are potential victims, each with their own backstories, social circles, connections, and roles within macro societies referred to as districts. At the centre of a district, you have a pillar, a central figure that keeps it all running. They have closer ties to certain characters who are slightly less important but still influential to the district at large. Then around those select few, we have a case of saints and sinners, where XP varies wildly depending on their social standing. A doctor has richer blood than a local hoodlum, for example, and so on. Each has a base stat, or level of XP to give. But if you learn more about these characters by talking to them, or finding evidence of their secrets, you can increase their blood's XP, dramatically in some cases. This is neat, as it encourages you to get to know someone to bump up their XP value. And the more you learn about someone, the more you empathize with them, making the decision harder. The game does overplay this hand on occasion. There are scummy characters you soon learn have hearts of gold, and saintly figures who are revealed to be dirtbags you can drink from guilt-free, but the mechanic of worming your way into someone's life, with one eye on an eventual betrayal, is a delicious one. All this combines into a moral playground for you to play the predator in. It treats vampirism as a strategy, and in doing so acutely captures the most perverse nature of the vampire myth, how he or she stalks the herd, carefully selecting its prey. Building on this is the idea that each district has its own metaphorical lifeblood that can be made more or less stable depending on your actions. Feed on too many citizens, and a place will fall into instability, and you don't want that to happen. If you do, a location will be overrun with monsters and wipe out all life entirely. When it comes time to eat, do you choose a person from an ailing district, already in trouble? Or do you pick someone from a stable area, which may or may not plunge it into chaos? I understand the idea of picking on a down-and-out area because no one's going to notice another body. That feels like classic vampire logic, rewarded by a smart interlocking set of systems. Obviously, all of your choices could be based on personal preference. You might have a thirst to try out those more exotic branches of the skill tree, or just some morbid curiosity to see how quickly a place can decline. But what's more interesting is how your interactions with vampires' choice systems can lead to moments where a bloodlust insidiously creeps up on you. In my playthrough, I came up against a tough boss in the sewers. It was a good several levels above me, as were the side quests I'd collected. To put it plainly, I needed to level up fast, so I decided to embrace someone at Pembroke. Unfortunately for me, my mesmerized level was low, leaving me with patients and stragglers for whom I felt nothing but sympathy. At some point, I'd convinced myself that scarred soldier Thomas Elwood was in constant pain, and that perhaps I could put him out of his physical and mental misery, but it felt pointedly cruel, and so I decided against it. After I'd decided not to feed on Elwood, I awoke the following night to find that half the staff of the hospital had contracted various illnesses. XP per head drops when the subject is sick, and I didn't have the ingredients to construct the required cures. With fewer potential feeding alternatives than before, I chose to feed on Elwood, regretting letting him go the first time. This experience is mine, and mine alone, of course, but it shows how a perfect storm of vampire systems, the need for XP, the emotional connection to characters, and the health of the wider world, can simulate a traditional bloodlust. Whether or not you can prioritize the needs of the citizenry above your own, to choose the path of goodness or evil. As the predator, the choice is yours, and how you make that choice is prompted by your temperament or playstyle. But this is only allowed to flourish through the game's systems, a masterfully designed role-playing balancing act. The problem is these moments of confluence don't occur enough, or are maybe undermined by loopholes that let you exempt yourself from making hard decisions. There are other means of earning XP, small doses for killing enemies or exploring new areas. Taken at face value, you'll never earn enough XP this way to power through the game, but it doesn't take long to realize that you can grind your way through the skill tree without drinking from the named citizens. It's a slow and arduous process, yes, but one that comes naturally to any seasoned RPG player. Faced with slaying named characters and destabilizing the region in which they live, or putting in a few extra minutes to run a circuit of enemy-infested streets, and most will opt for the latter. Much of the drama of drinking comes from the fact that it's your choice, and your choice alone. And it would be diminished if the game arbitrarily forced you to, say, drink a citizen every few days, but I do wonder if the thirst is too easily ignored as it currently is. Even with this qualm, I love how Vampyr puts you in the shoes of the monster, in a way that doesn't obviously force your hand. How you approach this depends on your own moral code and view, which ties it in nicely to those enduring themes of vampire stories I mentioned: morality, goodness, and fear. But instead of questioning the values of a time, it's testing your attitudes as the player of the game. Unlike countless vampire fiction throughout the ages that acted as a reflection of broader society, Vampyr's choice system is what you fear, how you feel about the fictional society and its attitudes, where you draw the line. The reward for engaging it is a story tailored to fit you. By giving you the chance to truly play the monster, and placing him within the rules and confines of an RPG, a genre that by definition requires you to roleplay, it explores the predatory strategy of a legendary creature.